A common problem with anatomy and organic forms when it comes to character, when it comes to creature art, right, the digital one, the common thing that I've seen or that I noticed is, well, it's this. And the problem is that I don't really know where to begin. I've had different conversations, I have different ways of approaching the subject, and I'm going to try and this time do it using the 3D scans. And perhaps this way, this is going to be a better, this is going to be a more illustrative, right, to just kind of point out what exactly is, I would say, wrong with anatomy, or in this case, a human being looking the way it's looking. So this is a free model. I don't know who made this. No disrespect to the person, right? This is just something that I wanted to use because, like I said, it's done in a very kind of common way. So let's begin. So the thing that is wrong, and perhaps it's too strong of a word, but I'm going to use it anyway. The thing that is wrong with this, apart from just proportions, and we might talk about it at some later point in time, the thing is that the model is looking flat. Not just the model, but the muscles, they're lacking depth. It feels like instead of there being a skeleton, right, so, like bone structure, then the kind of organs, right, all the digestive system and all of that, and on top of that there are muscles, and muscles connect to the bones, right? Instead of this structure, it feels like underneath the skin and underneath the muscles that we see here, there is either, in the case of, for example, biceps, there is either nothing, and so the muscles, they're just floating in space almost, or instead of a skeleton and rib cage and all of that, it's almost like there is a almost like a simplified version of the same thing that we see here. So for example, when it comes to pecs, when it comes to the abdomen, it feels like the insides, if we strip this model of the muscles, there would be a box, right? There would be just some box, and on that box the muscles are placed. If we look at a 3D scan if we look at a real person, and he's very grumpy, but this is a very, very good example just of the structure and just the musculature, right? Even though obviously the first kind of obvious thing that stands out is just that if we look at just from perspective of just kind of mastery, right? If this wasn't a 3D scan and it was just another piece of work, the first thing that was obvious probably was the level of mastery, right? Like the kind of the tightness of things, just the way it's executed. But the other thing that I wanted to pay attention to and just point our attention to is the depth. It's the fact that things are just have more depth, right? It's not that there's a box inside of the body, right? And on top of that there are muscles. Everything here feels like it's being connected to something else, right? That there's some kind of connection, that there's something going on inside of the surface, which is exactly what is happening, right? If we study anatomy, we understand that, for example, the pecs, they connect to the bone on the arm, right? So the whole kind of structure of the pecs are going this way, and so the depth is there. And so what I wanted to do here to illustrate some of the things, and I hope this will work, is I'm going to put some like markers on the model and compare that with the model that we do see here. Even though we have different poses, right? Different position of the arms, for example. So here, if we compare the pecs are just being stretched, right? That's just the normal way of things to be, because I've just mentioned that the points of pecs connecting, well, not connecting but holding somehow, is one of the points is on the arms, right? So when we lift the arms, the pecs naturally they stretch. So compared to this, we have the opposite, right? Here the arms are kind of lying across the body. Well, same thing here, right? So because of this, the pecs are obviously they are kind of larger. They have more volume. Still, I think for the point of illustrating, for the point that I'm trying to make, even this is going to be good to get it across, right? To get that point across. So let's do it this way. Let's look at the pec. So let's look at the silhouette of the pec, right? And I'm going to outline that silhouette by positioning just a stroke, like a mask, right? Just outlining the silhouette. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna rotate it just slightly because we have just a little bit different angles, I guess. So somewhere perhaps here, right? That would be the angle. And I'm going to mask it out the same way. So if we go back to our guy and we position the outline where it was, if we start rotating and we look at the muscle, we see that there is a whole section of the muscle begin to appear, right? So perhaps I should use colors instead of mask, but yeah, let's actually just give me a second. Okay, I'm gonna do it on the next stage. It doesn't matter. What I'm trying to point out is this whole section in here, right? That from this angle, even though this is the end of the pec, if we rotate, we can see that there is quite a bit of mass still to the pec. If we do the same thing on this guy, right? If we begin, and this is probably the angle, if we begin to rotate, yes, there is some mass of the pec still left, but it's nowhere near, and the angle here is not a good one because it's the muscle is kind of stretching, but the muscle, the end of the muscle is almost the same from here as it was from here. Let me give you just a different example because I don't think this one is working. Let's just examine for example the deltoid, right? And I am going to use colors now. So this is the quote-unquote end of the deltoid, right? So let's take this model instead. Roughly the same angle, and this is going to be the end of the deltoid on this guy, right? So if we do the same thing, if we start rotating, we begin to see that there is that, right? There's this whole section that is still left, that is still visible. If we do the same thing on this guy, right? So this is the end of the deltoid. I mean, even if I rotate the model this way, so we kind of get the outline of the deltoid a little bit more, even though this changes the angle quite differently, right? I'm almost looking from the back of this guy. I'm seeing just way too much of the back of the guy. Here, I was looking almost from the front, right? Definitely not from this angle. So if I put it somewhere like that, and if I start rotating, the end of the deltoid, the one that we pointed out, is pretty much where the deltoid ends on the model, right? So this section in here is just it almost doesn't exist, right? So from this angle, the end of the deltoid is the exact same end if we look at it from this angle. So what I'm trying to illustrate by creating all those markers is that the muscles, they don't go inside in here, right? And this is that's the difficulty of explaining this thing. It feels like the muscles are just lying like that, right? Like this is the end, right? This is the whole muscle. There's nothing more than what we see on the surface, right? So this is the muscle, and underneath there's something else. There's some kind of a boxy structure on which the deltoid is being almost like literally glued to, right? It was just kind of put on top, and that's about it. But if we know anatomy, and even if we don't know anatomy, but we can use some tools to analyze things, right? So in this case, the tool is being the 3D scan. If you enjoy this content or find it useful, please consider supporting me by buying me a cup of coffee via the link in the description. If we analyze, we understand that this is, well, the muscle has more depth, right? It's a different structure. It feels differently. It feels like, even though it ends, the color that I kind of used here, that it ends here, it still feels like it's going inside somewhere, right? That the muscle is just not, it doesn't really stop here, that the muscle goes inside somewhere there, and then something is there, is happening. And that's when if we open an anatomy book, we understand that there's in fact more things happening, right? That there are bones, there are tendons, and all of those things. And the muscles, they have volume, they have a structure, they have a specific way of connecting to other things, specific ways of those muscles connecting to each other. And if we go back to the amazing work by Carlos Huente, we get to see that. Right, we get to see this very depth that I'm trying to explain. That things here, this is 2D, right? And one of the reasons why I love his work so much is that when it comes to form, at least, right? I mean, the subject matter, as I've mentioned, is not my cup of tea, but when it comes to the form, there is just that exact same feeling of depth, right? So if this is the deltoid, it doesn't feel like it's just lying here. It feels like it goes somewhere underneath, right? There's just more stuff going on. So the bicep, it almost like it's growing somewhere in there, right? There's just something about the way that it's positioned, the way it's kind of merges with everything else. It's just so much more organic. It just has so much more depth to that, right? And it doesn't feel like this guy is boxy, even though we can use one of those techniques to kind of break things into bits, right? To break things into primitives. And yes, there will be in fact a box, but it's just it doesn't really help anything. The box will simply help the kind of the proportions, but it doesn't help with the fact that the guy, if anything, he looks more like a barrel, right? That there is a lot of kind of depth and curvature to that, right? You don't feel any flatness to the creature, and it's everywhere. If you examine his work, it's just everywhere. The way he makes the forms, the way he makes the muscles, they feel exactly the same way as they do here, right? Just one to one. So for example, look at this spec, right? Look at the way it's done. Look at the arm here. This is exact same feeling, right? Different assets, so to speak, right? There's a creature, there's a real person, but the structure and the way it's done, it's exactly the same thing. And Carlos, in his workshop, he said that he never studied anatomy, right? He, as far as I remember, I might be making this up, but I think it's what it was. He said that he doesn't know the names of the muscles, right? To him, it's more important as to what kind of feeling do we get, right? Like what form tells us, how it reads, right? All of those things. And this is what we get to see here. And that's the kind of the issue that I see very often on models, is that they are just it's not that they're simple in the sense that they execute it in a kind of simple way. That's fine, because those things, they can be improved, right? We can work on the muscles and make them look a little bit better. It's not just that. It's just that the muscles, the way that everything is structured here, is lacking that very depth that I keep on mentioning here. And that would be everywhere. That would be across the whole model. So if we look at some other things, if we look, for example, at this muscle down here, right? So kind of that's the from the top. That's the end of the muscle. If we look at this guy, from the same kind of angle, from almost from the very top, right? If we outline and then we move back, there is still some part of that muscle in here, right? And if we if we look at this guy from here, perhaps there is some, but it's definitely not as much as we see here. So that means that in some sense, what that means is that the structure of the muscle, without just going into anatomy, right, into how it connects and what is going on underneath and all of that, the structure of the muscle is doing that, right? That there's a lot more volume to that. There's a lot more kind of round the shapes to that. Whereas here, things are just a little too flat, right? So instead of being this, right, this kind of the profile of the muscle, it's just almost like a straight line. So that's the depth, and it's yeah, like I said, if we analyze things, if we analyze almost everything that we see here, it would be the exact same issue. It would be the exact same problem, that things are just they're not necessarily curvy enough, but the muscles, they don't feel like they here, the muscles, they don't feel like they're going anywhere, right? Like what we see here is what we get. So what we see here is the muscle, right? What we see here, that's the muscle. This is the muscle. But that's not it, and that's why anatomy. That's why studying anatomy, not studying in a sense that understanding the names of the bones, but studying anatomy like Carlos Huente. I'm guessing here, right? I haven't asked him that, but I'm guessing that the way he studied the anatomy was just understanding the kind of the structure, understanding the mechanics, right, behind it. Understanding that what is happening underneath, and if we again analyze or apply this mindset to the real life or to real world examples, we get a match, right? We understand that this muscle is not just this muscle that we see here, that in fact it goes deeper, right? It has connections to bones, and so the surface here is going to be just a little bit more rounder, just a little bit bulkier, because there is still more of the muscle that is happening underneath, right? That is inside of the skin. The muscle is still taking place. It's still there, compared to here, where the feeling is just almost non-existent, right? That it feels like the muscle just simply ends in here, and whatever is happening underneath, that's just a different matter altogether, right? So this is as good of an explanation perhaps I can give you to I can give when we look at the anatomy, and one of the bigger problems, or one of the bigger issues that I notice, not the execution, because we here, for example, it feels like the level of skill is good, right? Because if I look at the way that this has been done, the abdomen, the muscles in here, the way it was executed, it's actually quite good, right? Everything here is clear, everything here is nicely smoothed out, right? And there's no noise. The shapes are very clear to read. So it's not the mastery itself, it's not the skill itself. Things can improve, right? We can definitely make this one just a little bit better. Perhaps we can minimize the those striations in here, and yes, and once we understand that the muscle structure connects here, the striations will not go here, right? They will actually go kind of here. Doesn't matter. It's just, again, those things, they are kind of simple. It's more easier to understand them and to improve upon to improve those things, right? But if we don't really understand the whole idea behind the muscles, right, behind the structure of things, the overall feeling will not get better. It will not be improved, right? We will just have a more kind of cleaner looking shape, which is a human body, but it won't feel like a human body. It would feel just something that is artificial, that things are just lying on top of something else that is happening underneath. Whereas what we want is the feeling of things being in harmony, right? Of things connecting somehow. We can't really see exactly how they connect, and that's the point. They do connect, but what we get on the surface is just the harmony between those things, right? It's just the way they flow, the way they lie, that they actually hold on to something else, right? Something underneath. And that's why we get this almost feeling of power, right? Even though this guy is super bulky, still, it's just that there are mechanics, right? There's functions to those things. And this function creates the shapes, creates the form, and all of that. And so I would just, if you have the chance to get your hands on some kind of scans, I would highly recommend just doing that, right? And instead of well, I shouldn't say instead of doing something, try to kind of analyze, right? Try to capture with your eyes just how much volume there are to things, right? And then when you use the scans to study, you can, on top of just trying to copy the actual shape, right, which is also a good idea, just trying to capture that, keep in the back of your mind that there is a structure, right, that things go beyond than just the surface of what we see.